My name's Diane. You're currently watching the Just Kidding Around show. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm excited about this show. This is the first time we've ever done an all-woman crew. I've never had that happen. So, also the camera's not on. I'm going to ask if people in the control room, if they could get that camera on, it would be most helpful. Thank you. I'm also excited because I'm welcoming somebody that's never been on our show before. And your name is Kate, is that right?
Katie.
So I call you Katie. Hi, Katie. Thank you for coming.
Of course. Happy to be here.
Yeah, I know the roads were pretty tricky out there today, and I appreciate you coming through the storm to be here. So thank you so much. And thank you to people in the control room. I appreciate that little flick of the switch that they just did. Anyway, thank you. Before we get started, could we look in the camera and give a shout out, maybe camera 2, give a shout out to somebody special?
Hello to all of my friends in Olympia that have been bugging me to hear some of my poetry. Today we're going to hear maybe one poem or two, so you can get a sneak peek of some of my writing that I haven't shared yet.
Oh, wonderful. And I'm going to say hi to all the students at South Bay Elementary. It's Poetry Month, actually, and so hopefully they will take away some things that, that are very useful. But it's not Poetry Month. April actually is. Upcoming, but we think this will air in April. So even if it airs in the summer, poetry is always wonderful. So, Katie, what is your inspiration? Why did you become a poet?
Well, I have written from a very young age, and actually something people might not know is I was really quiet as a kid, and I even went through some speech therapy when I was young, when I was in kindergarten and first grade as well. And I think I started to turn to writing when I was little because it gave me a voice. And I started writing at that time.
Do you know what? I have brought, because I'm a school librarian, I've brought a lot of authors into the school, and I'm surprised at how many of them were quiet, shy children. So writing can give you a voice sometimes. Definitely.
And it's something I did from a very young age. My biggest inspiration writing-wise, especially for poetry, has always been the moon. In fact, when I was about 3, my mom has a memory. We were driving down the road at night. I was in the back seat, and I said, "Hey, Mom, yes, honey? The sun and the moon are for all of us to share, huh?"
Oh.
And it really moved her to tears. She still talks about it today, but ever since, I've always written about the moon and nature as well.
And how old were you?
3 or 4.
That's pretty.
Pretty inspired at that time.
I'm trying to think. We're very insightful or very deep thinking. Kids at that age usually don't think that deeply. But so if you have a child at home, it's never too early to encourage them to write.
Definitely. And both of my parents were very artistic as I was growing up. So.
That was going to be one of my questions. Are you from an artistic family?
Definitely. My mom loves to draw and paint and write as well. And my dad sings and plays guitar.
Are you, this sounds off the subject, but are you left-handed by any chance?
No, I'm right-handed.
Okay.
I wish I was left-handed.
I know, because sometimes
they're cool.
kind of sometimes, anyway. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but I kind of have this theory that sometimes left-handed people
are more creative,
or they think outside the box a little bit more.
I can see that.
I have a niece that's left-handed, and she just does whatever, thinks differently. But I'm sorry, I didn't mean to go down that path.
No, not at all.
But so anyway, so your first really deep thinking about the moon was probably when you were just before you even went to school.
Yes.
And then was your first poem about the moon?
It was.
Okay. Do you happen to have that very first poem?
I don't have it.
Oh, I wish you did.
I don't have it here in front of me or on my blog, but perhaps another time.
Okay.
I could bring it forth.
All right. Did you bring a poem that you would like to read?
And of course, because so much of my writing is centered on the moon and I shared that childhood story, I wanted to read one poem that is about the moon, which I'll do now.
Okay.
The title is Moon Drops, and I do have it on my blog, which on the lower thirds of the screen, we're going to have my blog link shared in case anyone wants to go back and read it. So I will begin. Moon Drops. It's written in the waves, it seems, the way the water sways, back and forth in tides, pulsing to the pool of the moon, that bright, beautiful, wondrous moon that has guided me here. As I sit with my toes covered in sand, I watch through the curtain of my long, thick brown hair. As sand falls from my fingertips, I veer at the moon, wondering when she will use her power to move the world again.
Oh my gosh, you didn't write that when you were 3?
No, not when I was
When did you
3.
write that?
In the last year.
Okay,
So
so
more current.
you mentioned looking, your long hair, which you mentioned you just got cut, but
did
before
just
the
cut it.
show started. But then, did you visualize this, or did you actually see the sand coming over your toes and
I
the?
visualized it, meaning I wasn't where I am in the poem at the
Right,
moment
that's
that I
my
wrote it.
question. Yes.
And my poetry just flows out of me at just a given time. I don't plan for it ahead of time. And sometimes I'll even have these dry spells where I'm not thinking of writing, and then all of a sudden it'll just come to me.
Wow.
And I'll write a poem. When I was little, since I was kind of quiet and kept to myself, I always saw the moon kind of as like a friend. A friend. Like when I would see the moon outside, I was really drawn to it. So that's why a lot of my poetry is about the moon, and I'm also writing a novel that has a theme that has to do with the moon as well.
So are you from around here, Thurston County?
No, I'm from California.
Oh, that's why you saw the moon more.
I
Because
did.
we don't
I
see the
did.
moon as
As
much
much.
here. But I got to tell you, when I see it, I'm sure a lot of people do too.
Yeah. It's
There's
stunning.
something, what is it about that moon? And up here, it's kind of a special occasion.
I know there's sometimes that I've gone through a couple surgeries. I mentioned one to
Yes.
you earlier, and there was a time that I was really nervous about this upcoming surgery, and the moon was just out that night. That I was feeling a little overwhelmed, and it just kind of wiped everything away for me. It was
Oh my
bright and
gosh.
golden, and
Was it a full moon?
it was a full moon,
Yeah.
and I think they call it
A harvest moon?
harvest moon.
Yes,
That's the word I was looking
I
for.
love harvest
It was
moons.
stunning, but just kind of having that guiding, glowing light, something about
As
that
a
has stuck
comfort.
with me.
More so than the sun?
Yes,
Maybe that's because we can't look at the sun.
oddly, even though I'm from California,
Uh-huh.
I prefer the rain.
Really?
I do.
Okay.
I like having seasons, so
Okay.
when it's rainy, and especially in fall when the leaves are falling, it's something that I just
Yes.
absolutely adore, because I grew up mostly in San Diego where
Yeah.
it's sunny all the time, so it's common to see the sun.
So it's like one season year round.
Exactly.
Yeah, down there, not up here
Not
so
up
much.
here,
No,
definitely.
no, I love the rain. In fact, now I'm getting off topic a little bit. The other day I asked somebody, well, what are they going to do for the weekend? And they said, oh, well, I'm going to kind of navigate around the rain. And I started thinking, well, I don't even notice the rain. I kind of move through.
Right.
Do you know what I'm saying? It's just,
I do, and I'll even still go for walks out in the rain. I don't
Oh.
mind it at all.
nothing like a spring rain. Well, for a poet, I would think,
Things
yeah,
like-
lots of
things like the-
opportunities there.
Things with the seasons, especially the sound of rain, and like I'm mentioning, the view of the moon, those are all motivators for me for stories or ideas that I've come up with.
So I want to go back to your poetry a little bit. I think a lot of people in our audience think that poetry needs to rhyme, and so it frustrates them, and they think they can't write poetry
Right.
because they think it's all rhyming. But that's really not true, is it?
I completely agree, and I've had very little formal training in writing. I haven't taken a formal class. I don't have a degree in writing. And, I used to think when I was younger that poetry had to rhyme, and I was focused on rhyming, but it didn't feel like my style.
Oh, it didn't feel natural in a
No,
way.
it
Yeah.
didn't, and
Too forced.
I consider mine choppy and raw. We've learned that it's called free verse when poetry doesn't
Okay.
rhyme.
I felt like it was very free flowing though.
I like the sound of that.
Mm-hmm.
But I like the rhythm that some of my poetry has, although it doesn't rhyme. It has a rhythm to me,
Mm-hmm.
a certain way that I like it to be written and I like it to be read, and kind of a dramatic effect with some of the poetry that I have. And
I thought what you read was very visual. I could see it I could just see it. Does that make sense?
It does, and I love hearing that, and that's something that others have shared with me too, that they could really visualize like the space that I was in. And
Yes.
and it's funny because some of the poems I write, while they're beautiful to people, they aren't based on necessarily a real setting that I was in.
It seemed to me like that was, though. It seemed to me like it was.
So I think that's kind of my style, to really to paint a vivid picture for the reader.
So if somebody's at home and they really want to write poetry, what would you call the type of poetry you just read?
Free verse poetry.
Free verse. And what would you say the first steps would be?
To just write.
And why is that different than maybe writing in a paragraph or writing a short story?
Because you could just pick a collection of words that you're drawn to. Let's say that, I mean, it seems silly, but you could be cooking and looking at a pot or a pan and pick up a baking spoon or whatever it might be, and you might have a poem started.
That is interesting.
You know, just writing a few words down, and then it kind of just comes together. And before you know it, let's say that you have 10 words written down and you've just written the start of a poem.
Do you think that, I hate to kind of, but do you think there's a lot of adjectives in there?
Yeah, that's true. And it's not surprising, that question, because if you think about adjectives, or I think adjectives are probably more common in some of my poetry than even verbs.
Okay.
Because I'm describing so much in them.
Okay, I hate to dissect it too much, because if you start dissecting it too much, wouldn't it almost become crippling in a way?
No, not at all.
No? Okay.
It's
But
fun.
a lot of adjectives.
Right.
Okay. But that might be different for somebody else.
It definitely could be, because they may find totally another style that they like to write in.
Yeah, and if you do want to start writing poetry at home, there's a lot of poetry that's non-rhyming. I know alliteration, the kids can have a lot of fun with that, you know,
Definitely.
but it's not as beautiful as what you write. And then we were talking about haiku before the show started. That's a Japanese form that's all syllables, and sometimes when you hear a haiku, it's like, it might not make sense until you know what you're listening to, and then it becomes more beautiful.
And sometimes it's really challenging to write haiku, because you are having to pay attention to the syllables.
Let's see, then you are dissecting a lot.
And I think that's why I found myself more towards free verse style, because I'm like, this just comes naturally. I don't have to think about it too much. It just kind of flows out of me. But haikus can be very beautiful.
Do you think you're intuitive in general?
I do think I'm intuitive.
And in what way?
I think that even more so than being intuitive, I'm really empathetic.
Ah.
So when I'm right, I often describe myself as an empath. So I'm really empathetic to others, and I can really feel the weight of emotions. And
so if you are a heavy thinker, or very empathetic, or intuitive, and you're listening to this could be a way, this could be a real outlet. You know, I know you're very happy in general, but there are a lot of people that fight depression nowadays.
Definitely.
And you know, this can be a tool to help you release that pent up emotion.
And put something on paper.
And to get it out on paper. Yeah, I know you even have a blog, don't you? Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
We're sharing currently behind us, and hopefully on screen.
Can Katie bring that, Kate?
Kate could bring up by clicking on my site on the upper left-hand corner, please.
There it is. Thank you. Thank you very much.
And it's my pen name, as I say, is Moonwriter. It's actually my pen name. And
do you have to have something like that copyrighted? Could there be another person with that same name? Or
there
just
potentially could be.
Okay.
But it's just something that I've always had. Like, my blog is Moonwriter, and then Stories Luna Told Me is kind of my header. And then on this site, I have a bunch of different poems and short stories that I've written just for people to be able to access them.
So how do we get to your blog?
So, there she goes. If you actually go
Oh.
to the upper left-hand corner under My Site, I can see she's trying to find it. There you go.
Thank you. That's our director doing all that. Thank
Yes.
you.
And then you can go, try click where it says Moonwriter on the upper left, where there's the picture. There you go.
Good listener.
And this has, we could scroll through, but you can also just go onto the site.
Thank you.
And kind of,
Thank
and
you
kind of
for
go
scrolling.
around. And I do photography as well. We were chatting about that a little bit earlier. I have
Before the show started.
I have
we
an
were talking
old
about
film camera, so right now you're seeing some of the shots that I've recently done.
So are those just from Olympia?
They are.
Do you know, Olympia has so many amazing views. I've just
It's
been noticing.
beautiful.
I've been just noticing in the last year, just like, oh my gosh, it's shocking.
It's, I've seen recently photographers that come from even Seattle to come to Olympia to shoot some shots because it's stunning.
So many different places, yes. So I want to talk a little bit about that too, but it's fun scrolling through all this.
There is
What's
a lot.
she showing us?
She's showing us that there's a lot. So I have tons of poems.
All right, and how long have you had this blog?
I think I started it in 2015 or so.
So you've had it then almost 10 years.
I've had
and then
it.
how much do you add? Do you continually add to it?
I do continue to add to it. I do
Okay.
prefer to write with pen and paper. So I like to first write, whether it's a short story or even my novel I'm working on, I write by hand first
Okay.
and then I put it into a digital
All right,
format afterwards.
okay.
So sometimes I'll
So
wait
you're a
until
little bit old school, but you're still,
Yes, which makes sense because even though I have my DSLR camera here, because I like to take digital photography too, I prefer film photography. I prefer writing by hand. I like using a typewriter.
oh.
So I appreciate all the old formats.
Yes.
But then I want to make them available to especially all my family that's in California, for example.
Oh, they're still down there, huh?
They are.
Oh.
So they can go on here and see the writing I've been working on or the photography that I've been doing.
Oh, good. Is it pretty active? I mean, fairly active? Do you have
It's
subscribers?
mostly my family more than anything because I honestly have not put myself out there with my writing until today.
Well, do you know you can take this show and also put it out there? Do you have a Facebook page or
Yeah,
something?
I do have a Facebook.
Okay, so if I send this to you, and it could be on your Facebook page,
I'll definitely
and then we
post
could
it.
have the blog information, so that could get you a little bit of more of an
Perfect.
audience, because I think this is really important. You're a wonderful person, and this is about you, but I think it's also reaching somebody out there, I don't even know who, that could need some healing. I'm sorry, I'm feeling,
I agree.
because I am thinking of somebody in particular. There's a lot of young kids, actually,
Definitely.
that, I don't know, that carry sadness.
And
And I don't know, maybe it's because they're on their phones all the time. I don't know what the problem is, but
I
there's a
think
lot of
that-
kids with sadness, and I really think, you hear journaling a lot.
Right.
Journal, that'll solve your problems, But I think free verse poetry, too, And then you said you write short stories.
I do. I've written a couple that I've recently sent out for contests. I'm waiting to hear
Ooh.
back to see how that's going. One is called Gaia,
Okay.
and it's a story. It's fictional, but it's a story about the oldest tree in the world that falls in love with a concrete building.
Oh my gosh,
And-
what a plot.
Metropolis starts to take
Okay,
over the forest.
please tell me it's for elementary children.
It is, I would say, I could see like 5th and 6th graders reading.
Okay, because I'm a school librarian. I want to be the first one to buy your book.
I can definitely make that
You know what?
happen.
That could make a cool picture book too, though.
I think it would. I really do. And I've also written, along with my wife, we wrote a children's book that we're working on right now, hopefully going to self-publish it on Amazon, and I'm doing artwork for it right now.
Okay.
But it is called The Adventures of Scarboy and Super Kitty. And there's a little boy that's in a wheelchair, but when he falls asleep, he becomes a superhero, and he's not in his wheelchair.
Oh my gosh,
And
I
he
have
goes
to
on
have that
adventures
book.
with
I
his kitty.
have to have it.
So we're working on it. I've been doing some drawings for the pictures because we do want it to be kind of a picture book style, but it is, I would say, like ages 7 to 9
Okay.
would be a good age range because it is a little bit darker, but it's also still because he goes through surgeries and, is dealing with being in a wheelchair. But it's a really cute story. That's another short story that we've
So
done.
you're not just a poet, you
No.
also are an author. You also are a photographer. So how do you combine your talents?
Sometimes I feel like my love for writing kind of informs the style of photography that I do in a way.
Okay.
Because my writing is kind of, at least for not so much the short stories, but with my poetry, kind of abstract, that free verse. I feel like I follow that same style with the type of photos that I take, especially when I'm using my film camera. I like taking close-up shots of things that are a little different and abstract, so I feel like they kind of tie together that way.
I need to get you together with Dan, who did my last show, because he was a digital photographer, but we talked about film photography too.
That would be a lot of fun.
Yeah. Would you please, we are actually getting down on the time, so could you read another poem?
Of course. I think I want to read one about nature, because I also love nature, which is why I'm actually an environmental specialist for the Department of Ecology.
Oh, okay. So if you recognize her, she works for the state. Before you start reading,
Yes.
I'm noticing it's written down. Do you not memorize your poems?
I do not memorize my poems.
Okay.
I could memorize some of my shorter ones,
Okay.
but no, I don't have them memorized.
Okay. It's
I don't
fine.
have a great memory.
I
wish I could memorize them.
I might go home and start writing some, but I don't
Anyone
know. Well, okay, go ahead.
So this one is called City Limits. Concrete jungles spread so quickly, erasing shades of green. These jungles are limitless. I only hope I can protect the 100-year-old oak tree around the corner from my childhood home. Deep down, I know it will too vanish to make room for the stone gods. Every tree that has not kneeled before them may be forced to fall to their knees, still grounded by their roots. These two worlds are not so separated. I can see the tree lines vanish as gray overcomes me. I can recognize the beauty of the city lights, yet the evergreens are drowned out by their brightness. As I look to the sky, I realize then, even with all of their power, the stars cannot be captured.
Oh my gosh, that is so beautiful but sad too.
Thank you.
That reminds me of the picture book you were talking about.
Doesn't it? I know.
Yeah.
It does kind of remind me of that. And
Yeah.
And you mentioned sadness. One thing I wanted to point out is I somehow find beauty in sadness. And I, as well as many others that I'm close to, have struggled with mental health and mental illness as well. But I think it's okay to combine beauty and sadness and to talk about it.
But you seem like a very happy person.
I am happy.
Maybe it's because of your writing. Maybe if you never would have started writing, maybe
That's very
you wouldn't
true.
be as happy.
Writing.
Do you get a dopamine rush from writing? Like after you finish a poem, and first, another thing, how long does it take you to write that? Do you write it in stages? Do you sit down and write it all at once?
All at once, usually. That's what I meant earlier when I said sometimes poetry
Waves.
just flows. It just like flows out of
Okay.
me. And I don't even know what sparks the idea. I think I see something like a tree in the wind blowing around.
Okay.
might
So it's
encourage
not
that
like you
poem.
struggle and
No.
one day start it and the next day you think, what would be good here?
It's just all at once.
Okay. See, I think when people rhyme poetry, I think they run into that maybe a little bit more.
I think
Or they
so,
write
too.
rap or whatever. It's like, I gotta,
Or they
what's
struggle
gonna
to
fit?
keep going.
Whereas this gets more of your emotion out.
Yes, and with poetry, it's easy for me, but I will say writing in long form, like working on my novel, for example, that's hard to me. I have to really use my brain
Oh, that's interesting.
and really focus on making the story last for a length of time, whereas a lot of my poetry is shorter.
Oh, you don't have that requirement that you know, I can write a short poem or I can write a long
Exactly.
poem. But when you're talking about, in fact, actually, if you're talking about books, there are usually a certain amount of pages in picture books.
Exactly.
And yeah, so you might have to stretch it.
There's a
and
lot
then,
of planning
Yeah.
where I'm just having to, you know, and writing fiction, I tend to get really poetic because
Mm-hmm.
I'm used to writing my poetry, which I don't think is a bad thing. Because I think it also has some beauty to it, but I just have to really focus on making the story
So
last.
if you were going to take that last poem and take that camera, what would the picture be of?
You know, it's funny, I was looking at it, actually,
Oh, you already took the
it's,
picture?
well, look.
What? What am I looking at?
Well, you might not be able to see it right
I
now.
can't see it.
But behind us,
Yeah.
Kate has pulled up the poem I just read on my blog, and
Oh.
there's a picture I took that represents the poem.
Well, I just asked that. I really had no idea it already
and
existed.
It has, this is taken at Evergreen State College, and
Okay.
it has the buildings to the campus behind a tree line.
Okay.
Where in my vision, the photo
Oh.
is the intersection of, you know, concrete and humankind with nature and the trees.
Wow.
So that does represent kind of the image that I was thinking of when I wrote it. And I think
Yeah.
I might have taken the picture first and then written the poem.
Do you know? Oh, that's interesting. I could see that. So that pit photograph could have been, is the inspiration sometimes for poetry and might be the inspiration for the children's book.
Definitely. And sometimes it's
Okay.
reversed. I might write something and then think of a really cool
Right. I'm going to
photo
have to have
idea.
you back when that children's book's done.
That would be fun to read.
So-
My grandma's, well, she was a grade school teacher for over 30 years, and she gave me an idea of having it become a series where he connects with other disabled kids and they go on these adventures together.
There are not enough books with
There are not.
children in wheelchairs.
That's exactly why it's our
It's actually a
focus.
struggle to find books with kids with disabilities. Not a huge struggle, but there are not a lot. And there's more and more books with superheroes. You know, that's kind of
Definitely.
the big thing. You know, you want your
Definitely.
main character to be a superhero in some regard.
And it's
you know.
like, why can't we combine those two?
I know, I
Disabilities and
love it.
superhero.
I love it. You know what? This is off topic, but when I was a kid, I would have this reoccurring dream for so many years. And it was that, this is really weird. I had this little lunch pail that was the same lunch pail from, you know, kindergarten to whatever, 6th grade. And I believed that if I spun my arm really hard with my lunch pail in it, then I could fly. I used to dream about flying all the time.
I did too.
No way.
I did.
Before, more in a sitting up position. Though.
Well, my sister and I thought we could fly off the second bunk of our bunk bed when we were little, and that was dangerous.
So I slept on a bunk bed too, on the second bunk.
Must be a
Oh
thing.
my, I don't know. Nowadays kids get their own bedrooms, so I don't think they have bunk beds. Well, you know, it's been so fun having you on, and I look
you,
forward to
Diane.
having you back another time. Maybe we can feature your photography or whatever, but we are down to less than a minute.
Yes, we are. We're about at time.
So, I do want to take some time. We have some new crew members.
Yes.
One came all the way from Brazil to be here,
Yes.
and she could probably talk a lot about jungles and cement. You know, I bet she's seen a few things. And that's Martha. Martha, we want to thank you for running crew and getting all our sound going. And Arzella is in the control room. So hi, Arzella. I know you're in there. And thanks to Kate, who brought up the blog. And of course, a huge thank you to you, Katie. And everybody came out on a very windy, haily, I even saw those big blobs of snow, whatever that's
It was
called.
trying to snow.
Yeah, it's the trying to snow, but we're all here, we made it, and
did.
I'm so glad, and I'm sure this show's gonna reach a lot of people and change lives, I'm hoping.
Thank you, Diane.
Yeah. Bye, thank you, join us again. We're on every Saturday, Sunday, and Wednesday. Bye.